Hello, you noble people. My name is the Noble, and we've all seen theories on Deltarune. I even made my own theory, which you should definitely go check out. I'm very happy about that video, but I'm trying to gear my channel into being able to play Deltarune. I've never really talked about Deltarune. I have done some Undertale stuff when my channel first started, but I want to try and gear not only myself for Deltarune, because it's releasing soon, but also the channel. So I'm going to kind of do a binge of doing a bunch of different topics that are relevant for Deltarune before the game actually fully releases. And I want to talk about some of the insane crack brain rot theories that the fandom has done over the entire timeline of Deltarune. And some of these could be plausible to this will never happen in a million years and you are actually on some type of substance when you are making this. But at the same time, I find all of these theories still endearing because this is kind of what happens when you don't have too much content, and no ill will to anyone who created these theories. I find them amazing and funny even if they are maybe a little bit bad. But without further ado, let's hop into the first crackpot theory. The mystery man himself is going to be what we're talking about first. Gastra is obviously supposed to be a mysterious character, but people seem to throw him at every single theory to make it make sense, when in reality, the really only actual confirmed stuff we've gotten with Gastra isn't even really confirmed. The Goner Maker section in Chapter 1 is literally the first thing you see when you open up Deltarune, and I mean, it says Goner Maker. It has a very similar dialogue pattern to how Gastra talks, and the music track is literally titled Another Hymn, like it's another Gastra, and it literally sounds exactly like Gastra's theme. But that being said, that is all we have with Gastra. Trying to tie him into being either the knight, the narrator, is kind of cheap and doesn't really feel like it has any actual substance. But I figured some people were going to bring up that I didn't talk about Gastra, so I decided to just throw him out there and just cover him in this little tidbit, and then we'll actually get to the much longer theories that actually have at least some type of substance. The next crack theory is the piles of Azrael's dust, which, yeah, might seem insanely weird if you've never heard about that theory, but I'm gonna guess you have. And actually, a little bit of a fun fact while researching, that picture I just showcased apparently is actually just a picture of actual cocaine that someone photoshopped Azrael's face on, which I did not know. I knew it was a crack theory, but I didn't actually know that it was supposed to be cocaine, which is a little bit funny to me. All jokes aside, what this theory is talking about is the fact that Azrael is dead, and the dust that monsters leave when they die is either landing on it's just in the dark world by itself, which created Rouse, or the most common theory is that the dust landed on a object usually associated to be the green crayon that is missing in the one of the coloring books that Chris has, as long with the devil horn headbands that Chris has. So Rouse could be either one of those things, which I feel like that makes sense for what Rouse is, but the idea that Azrael is dead and Rouse is supposed to be the dead Azrael is a little weird. That being said, there is at least some kind of merit that makes this theory actually interesting. The idea that Lightners can be kind of reincarnated or reborn if they bring their ashes or dust to the dark world. I think it's a very interesting theory on the side of the fact that dust could be transferred into the dark world to obviously make a reborn Darkner or reborn Lightner, whatever. I definitely could see this happening to possibly Rudy if he were to die. Maybe Noelle tries and desperately tries to bring him back with a Dark Fountain. I could 1,000,000% see this happening in some type of capacity, but I feel like just saying, hey, Azrael's dead because he's not an on-screen character is a huge stretch in logic and not really grounded in everything. and this is very notorious for being one of the most crackpot theories. Toby is doing some teasers leading up to Chapter 3, and there's these blob things in the cliffs area of the game, and in this new teaser, these are there as well, and people apparently think these blobs are Azrael's dust, so the comments on the Twitter post are just people commenting Azrael dust, and it's really funny. But at the same time, it's not a theory with much basis, but I still like it anyway. The next theory we're going to talk about actually has some kind of connection to the piles of Azrael's dust theory. Now, it's not randomly talking about, hey, I think one of the characters that is said to be alive is dead. However, it's actually using this kind of basis of the fact that we could perhaps see Darkners or Lightners be dead and then have their own versions of a Rouse. And this does kind of hinge on the fact that the characters that are the reincarnation or the anagram are going to be dead. So even if this character were to exist in the actual timeline, this would mean that the piles of Azrael's dust would have to be canon, unfortunately. But the fact of it is, I feel like this is one of the few theories that I actually wouldn't mind happening, and this is the Oberon Smog theory. Now, I may be a little bit confused why I just showed a picture of Gerson, but the Oberon Smog theory is actually taking a name from actually a Shakespearean play, which is the character in that play is the Fairy King, and I don't know too much about the overall play, but it has similar themes to Deltarune with escapism. Obviously, Deltarune is supposed to be escapism. We already have escapism via the internet and escapism via, like, board games, and most likely Chapter 3 is going to be escapism via the TV, and then different chapters are going to continue that type of trope through each chapter, and that's one of the main themes of Deltarune. And the character of Oberon Smog is actually supposed to be a Rousification or a anagram of Gerson Boom. Now, the extra part of the name Smog is a little bit out of ordinary. Obviously, it has to be a full anagram of the character's name, so there needed to be that extra tidbit. You can't just leave out extra letters. So the interpretation that the theory uses is that this is interpreting that the smog is the smog from the fountains when you first open them. We saw at the end of Chapter 2, when Chris opens the fountain, that there's kind of a black smoke or smog filling the room because it's a fountain, and that is leading into the fact that this Gerson wannabe or this Gerson Rouse character is actually going to be the knight, at least for a couple of the chapters. And while this might seem a little bit of a leap in logic, it's not actually that big of a leap in logic, especially considering we just went over the Azrael's Dustis theory. The character Alvin is the son of Gerson, and he has some interesting dialogue choices dialogue things in Deltarune, especially in Chapter 2, where he is mourning the loss of his father, and he mumbles something that we couldn't quite hear, which is very interesting. There's also stuff in Chapter 1 where you can investigate the classroom, and there's apparently pictures that he had made that possibly were illustrations of Gerson. Now, this more points to the possibility that Alvin could actually be the knight. There's even a theory where he is doing this to try and bring his father back. There's also a theory that Gerson actually got his ideas from his stories because he was a story writer in Deltarune. He could have possibly got his ideas from these stories from the Dark Worlds. So I feel like there is something credible to this theory, and the idea that we could get more anagram characters is cool. I mean, we already have Deltarune being an anagram in Undertale, and obviously Rouse and Azrael being an anagram. So it's not really out of the ballpark to say this is completely not even worth considering. The only problem is that if Oberon Smog was a resurrected or had the dust of Gerson and was his embodiment or reincarnation, that would unfortunately mean Azrael would have to be dead, which I don't really know if I want Azrael to be dead, because I really don't want the piles of Azrael's dust theory to be true, but still an interesting theory nonetheless, even if it has some little bit rocky elements, but it has a lot more evidence than the piles of Azrael's dust. The next theory we're going to talk about is the friend inside me theory, which I'm going to have to play a video for you to understand. Yep, that's pretty much what the entire theory is about. Now, obviously, there is more to the theory than just being whatever that was. That is actually something made by Toby Fox. He did a random post on Tumblr, most likely to be funny, with, obviously, it's the song from Toy Story slowly altered, and the voice, instead of saying, "You got a friend in me," it's, "You've got a friend inside me." Like, I don't know if it was meant to be either creepy or funny or both at the exact same time, but people looked way too much into it. But at the same time, there's a lot more merit, especially considering that this is probably one of the few cracked theories that I wouldn't actually be surprised if it's going to be true. Now, that's not the only thing that this theory is going off of. Like I said, this is probably the theory that we're going to talk about that has some of the most merit. In one of the original newsletters Toby did on Deltarune, in the Spamton sweepstakes, we saw stuff about Cowboy. Chris and Susie were dressed up as a cowboy, or cowboy as cowgirl, whatever. And in that newsletter, it said it might end up getting canceled. However, the wording is really, really weird. I'll read it out to you now. However, this segment is in danger of being canceled. Seriously, one of our only segments that we teased may end up being canceled. Well, that's how cowboy shows go, I guess. It's very interestingly worded, especially considering the other scrapped actual content that we do know that has been confirmed. The stealth section in Chapter 3 had a lot more stuff going on. It actually gave us a full animation of Susie, Rouse, and Chris actually sneaking. They explained why the segment was going to be cut. It kind of slowed down gameplay and didn't really fit into the elements of Chapter 3, and Toby even showcased a scrapped song for that segment. So it's very suspicious that Toby worded it like this, almost like this is the in-universe explanation of why a cowboy secret boss character would have their show canceled. In Toy Story 2, one of the main themes of that actual movie is the fact that Woody's show, Woody's Roundup, actually got canceled in-universe, which actually caused Woody to be somewhat of an antique, which is, obviously I'm not going to explain the whole plot of the movie, but that's one of the key elements. So the idea that Toby could possibly be twisting that into a forgotten character from a TV show, because obviously we know Chapter 3 is going to be all about TV and whatnot, it makes somewhat sense that there would be a character that could possibly either resent like showrunners, resent their creator, or resent whoever canceled the actual show, possibly Tenna, or maybe even someone above Tenna, because people think there might be someone above Tenna, but I don't know if we'll cover that in this video. But it is an interesting hypothesis. There is also an ongoing theme with all of the other secret bosses actually losing something. Jevil is very obvious. He lost his sanity. I mean, chaos, like, he is the literal definition of someone insane. Like, he lost his mind, most likely to Gastra or whoever the secret person who is messing with these characters are. For the case of Spamton, he didn't really have anything to begin with, and then he got the phone call that made him big, and then he got that ripped away. So it was very obviously that he was manipulated and lost everything. So obviously he has a reason to try and get big again. He literally says he doesn't want to be a puppet on a string anymore, so he's being led along. With a case of a character that could be a cowboy with a canceled show, this could be a character that wasn't necessarily as broken or insane as Jevil and Spamton. Obviously they both have their own distinctiveness. Jevil's obviously very insane, while Spamton sometimes talks like a normal person, but obviously he has those cracks where he has ads and stuff, and he is still like a spam email, so he's going to be somewhat corrupted. Just having a normal cowboy character that is on like a path of like jealous induced rage actually makes sense, especially considering what Sham tells us about the Shadow Mantle. When talking to Sham about the Shadow Crystals, you can interact with them again to have them talk about the next secret boss, which states that it's going to be impossible to win without something called the Shadow Mantle. Now, they can't find it in their shop, which most likely means it's going to be somewhere in Chapter 3, and we're either going to have to like craft it or fuse it together or just find it in a chest, and that's how we're going to access the secret boss. But the fact is it seems like this boss is actually going to be the strongest boss yet, which makes me feel like they're going to be a lot more aggressive than Jevil and Spamton were. I don't really see Jevil and Spamton as necessarily aggressive. Yes, they kill you and they are the hardest bosses in the games, but the way they attack you is different. For the case of Spamton, he was simply doing it for a means to an end. He literally completely gives up once he realizes you and the crew are breaking his strings, trying to gift him his freedom. The only reason he wanted to attack Chris is to get their soul to be big enough. With the case of Jevil, it's literally just him being simple and just having chaos. Like, he just wants to play a fun numbers game. It's literally what he says. He just can't tell the difference between having fun and playing and actually killing someone. That's the whole point of his character. He's supposed to be a insane type character. But if a character like a Woody TV star or whatever, I feel like it might be the case of they actually can't be possibly spared, and we might actually have to fight, or the power of the Shadow Mantle allows us to fight him a certain way. I could 100% see us possibly being able to beat him without the Shadow Mantle, but it's a lot more difficult and we have to use violence. But if we get the Shadow Mantle, we can actually fight him with like the normal spare technique that we usually do with the secret bosses. Now, for credibility, I do feel like this theory does have some merit. I know a lot of people don't like looking too much into newsletters and looking too much into the Spamton sweepstakes stuff. One of the big problems people do have with this theory is the fact that the cowboy wouldn't necessarily be a tangible thing in the Dark World. With Spamton and Jevil, they both have Dark World counterparts that are things that are usually discarded, which makes sense for their story. For example, Jevil is supposed to be the Joker card. Usually you discard the Joker card, and sometimes you discard the Rules card, which is kind of why Rules is a joke character, and then Spamton is obviously a spam email, something you discard and now don't look at. So for that to be a canceled TV show, I mean, people love canceled TV shows that don't go on anymore, but maybe this is one that people didn't really care about or like didn't get any traction. So saying that it is just the TV is kind of a little bit of a cheap cop-out, but I could 100% see this as something, and I really like it. But I hope you did like this video. I had a lot of fun with this. We only really covered 4 things, maybe technically 3 because Gastra was only a little bit of a segment, but I had a lot of fun with this. Tell me if you do want me to talk about some of the crackpot theories that are even more insane. These ones were more surface level. I know the piles of Azrael's dust is a little insane, but I feel like these theories, while yes, are still crazy, they're still endearing, and I love that people make these theories because you can tell they're passionate about this game, and I'm passionate about this game as well. So thank you for watching this video. If you want to see more stuff like this, I recommend you go check out my theory video. I'm very proud about that. But yeah, that's about it. Stay noble. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.